Welcome to MarketTamer.com. Today we'll talk about two terms which, if you do not know them, you really need to know them. But what you really need to know is what the impact of them is and will be in the future. So the terms are mark-to-market and mark-to-model. So if you hear these terms, they're generally just accounting terms. Mark-to-market is obviously a well-known accounting term. And what does it mean? Well, if we consider a company that loses some money and it reports a loss, it's generally going to mark to the market value. That is, it's going to report on whatever the market conditions are for that investment at that point in time. So if it's a loss, it's going to report that loss. Now, where mark to model comes in is where a company says, you know what, I know we've lost a lot of money, but actually we're not going to report that loss. What we'll report is some future value that we project based on some algorithmic model. So for example, let's say a company, some bank for example, might have lost a couple of $1 billion. Well, they could mark to market and say, hey, we lost a couple of $1 billion. Or based on changes in accounting rules recently, they could take money that they've received from the government, add that to projections of what the future value of those investments will be according to some model or some algorithm, and then they could report those in their quarterly numbers. Now, if that seems like it's almost like putting your head in the sand, it seems like it's hiding from the reality of the situation, well, as we would see it, it is. It is a projection based on a future value, based on assumptions that are not necessarily reflecting the reality of the time. Certainly, if I'm investing in a product, I want to know what is the situation now. I don't necessarily want to know what is the situation best case in the future based on optimistic assumptions. Obviously, the best case assumptions and the best case outcome is a data point that would interest me, but it's not the data point that I would like to use as the basis of my investment in a company. So when you're seeing banks coming out reporting profits, even though you know that there have been losses, you have to question how are they actually accounting for these. And accounting, as we all know, is a pretty gray area. Based on different assumptions, rules, new regulations that have come out. We've certainly seen in the past Enron and WorldCom and all these companies where creative accounting has led to far superior reported returns than necessarily were the case. So we have to stay based in reality here and question the numbers that are coming out. And what the real importance of this is, the reason we're talking about this today, is what it means for the future. And what it means for the future, as we see it, is again more volatility. We've spoken about the heightened likelihood of increased volatility in the future based on increased printing of money. But this is another basis for an increase in volatility, in that if we see numbers oscillate much greater than we would have expected. For example, we're expecting a big loss, but because of mark-to-model versus mark-to-market, we see, in fact, a much higher number reported. Well, that's going to change expectations significantly. When that number comes out, potentially the street was expecting one number, another number is reported. Obviously, the market reacts to that, and as such, we'll see big shifts in stock prices. We all know around earnings season, we see these big jumps up or down based on how a company reports relative to expectations. And ultimately what this means is that you as an investor, a trader, needs to understand risk mitigation. More than anything else, and more than any other time in history, we believe, this is absolutely pivotal for you right now, to master strategies that optimize volatile conditions, to be prepared in case we see these more volatile times come to pass as we expect based on the current situation. So with all that said, please feel free to ask us more questions. Come on into classes and we'll be delighted to teach you those strategies.